Hello, YouTube. My name is Daniel Marcolongo. I just wrote my first book, The Legend of Rovan, The Beginning, and it's been quite a journey, actually. Well, if you're interested, it's on the Kindle bookstore currently, and I'm going to have hopefully paperback pretty soon here, within the next week, hopefully, actually. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and start these videos by going through a few things that I'm going to have on my blog, which is everyonelovesblog.com. And that's going to be a little bit of where I'm going to also talk about writing and like some of my journey for writing and, probably talk about the book every once in a while here and there. So, anyways, let's get started here. So the first thing was that I put everything on paper. At first. So basically, I don't suggest doing this because, well, putting everything on paper, it's not really going to make it easy for you later, because eventually you're going to have to get this on the digital format, and unless you're scanning everything and you have some kind of software to like read that, it's not going to be fun. Getting someone to transcribe that also probably isn't going to be very cheap, so once again, highly suggest getting it onto a computer. If you don't like it, I'm sorry, but you probably want to suck it up. I had to eventually, even if you're like me and don't like basically typing. Well, at least back then I didn't. Now I am a little bit better about that, so hopefully none of you are already using your written word on an actual piece of paper. Anyways, the next thing is that I actually lost the original manuscript, and I had about 6 chapters of this book already put down into the computer at the time, but needless to say, losing that manuscript kind of made me lose the will to write the book again. I basically had it completed, and honestly, I lost a lot of good material in there. I did remember the general layout of what I wanted to have happen for this book, and, but it doesn't matter because I would just suggest, once again, don't put it on paper. Back it up everywhere. Make sure you have copies. Just make sure that's not gone. It's a lot easier to lose paper than it is to lose, digital things, especially if you're emailing it to yourself, etc., that kind of stuff. Also, I didn't really use an outline. I kind of prefer the free flow style of, doing things, so I do kind of go off the whims, I wouldn't suggest that for everyone. Honestly, having an outline is pretty good. And I'm not really going to use probably an outline religiously at any time soon. But I do want to have, I'm in the future going to have, of course, stuff like, have some kind of outline. Just names, names of cities, spells, that kind of stuff. Anything important, anything continuity-wise that you're going to have to bring up later, I would highly recommend keeping these things. So the next thing was basically it took a while to get started after I lost the manuscript. So honestly, it took like years for me to get the will to write this again. And I know there's a few of you out there who probably are kind of putting it off and don't really feel like writing, but I would highly suggest just sitting down, making some kind of rule every time you sit down for this, 10 pages for every time that you sit down for it. Doing it at least once a week. Honestly, that's pretty much the strategy I used, and I got done with my book within like 6 months. Obviously, there was like editing and stuff that I had to do afterwards, however, and revisions, of course, too, but my first draft was completed within about 6 months. So the final thing out of these 5 bullet points, of course, I didn't know when to start the second book. I started to reach the realm of like 150,000 words, and I kind of didn't know whether or not I wanted to start the second book yet. So I was about halfway through the original manuscript, essentially, that I had written. So I had to make a decision. I kind of looked it up online, just saw the average for, fantasy novels. I looked up like Aragon and some other books that I read. Also Harry Potter, of course, and just kind of looked for the general word count of these books. And not necessarily, I didn't really necessarily use it as like the Bible of, when to stop my book and start the next book, but I definitely would say it was pretty important. I highly recommend looking at these things for your genre because it'll definitely help you decide, if you're making a series, of course, for when to stop. Also, it might be helpful for maybe thinking about cutting things out of your book later on. If you're only making one book, you might be a little bit too lengthy. However, do what you got to do. If you need all that stuff in your book, of course, put it in there. So, anyways, just to go through everything again, once again, my first mistake was putting it onto paper, of course. My second one was losing the original manuscript because, of course, of the first thing, essentially. The third one was I didn't use an outline, really. The fourth one was that it took a while for me to get started. And the fifth one is that I didn't know when to get started with the second book. So, anyways, hopefully everyone takes advice from me here about this, or, if you think that none of this is valid to you, that's, well, fine. But please like, subscribe, share, check out my book, of course. I mean, that's kind of why I'm here as well. But keep on writing, and everyone, have a good night.